Hello and welcome. Well, this is the next part of the whole coronation saga. And the question in front of us is, can the monarchy survive? Obviously, King Charles will be crowned. But will the monarchy be able to survive given the way in which the coronation has been set up to take place? My answer to that, as people have asked me this in various news outlets across the world, is that the monarchy can only survive insofar as Great Britain or the United Kingdom is Christian. How far is it Christian? Well, not very is the answer. And the extent to which it's not very Christian is the extent to which the monarchy is in danger of not surviving. How do we know that? Well, we know it because of the way in which the coronation service has been set up. We know it because there's a clash between two worldviews, between an absolutist and an objective set of criteria, and a relativistic and a subjective set of criteria. And they come together in a clash. King Charles, sadly, is a subjectivist and a relativist. Already we've described how he was brought up under the influence of Carl Gustav Jung, and he sees religion as basically a good thing in general because it pursues and defends a whole series of values, helps with self-actualization, but he wouldn't want to make any distinctions in terms of different religions. But the religions themselves are completely uncompromising. Islam is uncompromising about the Prophet, and we know what steps Muslims will take for those who threaten the absolutist claims of Islam. But then Christianity is too. Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to me but the Father." Now, many people find this quite offensive and difficult, but think for a moment. Which of the other religions take you to the Father? It's not Islam. Allah in Islam is not a fatherly figure. Indeed, he's not even someone you can have a personal relationship with. Allah is essentially unknowable, beyond the capacity of human beings. In Christianity, he is both unknowable and knowable at the same time through Jesus. Buddhism has no principal idea of a God at all, just nirvana, just the extinction of everything, the reconciliation of the one. So you don't meet the Father in Buddhism, nor in Zoroastrianism, nor in Hinduism, nor amongst the Jains. Jesus is the only person who introduces us to God as the Father, and he says he is the way, the truth, and the life. So there is no relativism inside Christianity at all. And what we're finding in the coronation is a clash of these two worldviews. So if you take the religions, the major religions, on their own merits, they will say to you, we have an absolutist claim. And both Islam and Judaism and Christianity say that the revelation we have comes from God. It wasn't made by human beings. It's filtered through them. It inevitably is distorted by our frailty, but ultimately it comes from God and it must be relied upon. So for Christians, all that we have in the scriptures is breathed by God. It's the word of the Lord. It is not subjective. It's not relativist. You can't mess around with it. However, what we have in terms of the religious views that Charles himself and our society subscribe to is a form of relativism. Everything is equal. You have no basis for choosing one over the other, and indeed it's offensive to choose one over the other. The interesting thing is that monarchy too is absolutist and objective. The way you get to be king is by not allowing to have any pretenders take your throne. Your family is the royal family. There is no relativism. It's absolutely objective. So on the one hand, you have the monarchy and Christianity, absolutist ideals and systems. And on the other hand, you have secular society and King Charles's own preferences, relativistic and subjective. Now they come together and they're clashing in the form of the coronation. So what's happened to the coronation? What tone has it set? What does it tell us? What message does it give us about what's going to happen? Well, it's really quite interesting at a number of levels. So first of all, the lawyers have won, and they have told King Charles that he can't have Muslims offering prayers in a Christian service because the law says that he can't. This is really quite fascinating, I think, because what we have here embryonically is a clash once again between Charles I and Parliament, Charles I being Charles III's predecessor. And you know what happened in that clash. Parliament won. And in any clash today, Parliament will win again. And in fact, Parliament, who mandates what canon law is, has won over the would-be interfaith appearances in the liturgy. So Charles has backed down, and instead what he's done is he's had a number of the members of the House of Lords who belong to other religions act as a part of his procession. And he's gathered a number of interfaith religious figures also to gather at the end as a kind of sign of strength, of interfaith coordination. So semiotically, at least, Charles has tried to gain back some of the ground he's lost in terms of the liturgy. But this is not simply about the coronation. It's also about what's going to flow from the coronation. Because one of the things Charles is trying to do is to please our secular relativistic culture. Well, you can see what he needs to. There is no organisation less diverse, less inclusive and less equal than the royal family. Why less diverse? Because only by belonging to the royal family do you get to be part of it. Less inclusive because, well, you could marry into it, I suppose, but the object is for it to retain its grip on power and on royalty on the throne. And less equal because it's all hierarchical and people are not equal. In fact, there are grades all the way through a monarchy, including in the awards that are handed out in terms of gongs and medals and those kind of things. So once again, the monarchy is not remotely woke, but Charles is. And what Charles has decided to do is to go along with the zeitgeist and to try and make the coronation as user-friendly to wokeness, diversity and progressive values as he can. What's the effect of this going to be? Is he going to buy himself into the affections of a relativistic, subjective culture? The problem is that the way he's done it is to damage the coronation service itself. It's a very ancient and beautiful service. It goes back nearly 1,000 years to when the Anglo-Saxon monarchs were being crowned. And many of the things that happen are ornate and feudal. And what Charles has done is to dilute them all. So instead of receiving a number of feudal accoutrements from different and varied noble lords whose duty and joy and privilege it is to bring him to the congregation, instead he's just not even going to touch him. He's going to wave at them and acknowledge them rather than receive him. Homage used to be given by kissing the monarch's cheek and touching the crown, something very tactile, very real, almost sacramental. No more kissing for Charles's coronation, no touching of the crown, just the wave of acknowledgement. But without this tactile, almost sacramental element, the thing becomes more superficial and less real. The other problem is that the feudal relationship was one of covenant. The reason that lords gave their allegiance to the king was because he promised to be effective in protecting them and the realm. And so the lords themselves had people who put themselves in the protection of the lord. And in a sense, that feudal system hasn't gone away. We all entrust ourselves to more powerful agencies. The one that's most obvious is the family. The family is a feudal relationship where parents and children covenant to look after each other, to be there for each other. It's kind of mini kingdom of a kind. But what Charles has done is to dilute the whole feudal ceremony and reduce it to a degree of superficiality that makes it even harder to believe in than historical pageant would give it to us as. And yet, amongst all the relativism and downplaying and demystifying, for example, one of the things that his mother was offered was she was offered the bread and the wine for the Eucharist at the offertory prayer, and she would receive it because there's something sacramental about the nature of kingship, like a priest or a bishop. But Charles isn't going to receive the bread and the wine. Once again, he's just going to wave at it. It's demystified, downplayed, desacramentalized, made more superficial. What's the point of it if you're going to demystify it? But at the heart of the service, Charles has to make the coronation oath. It's really quite severe, and it goes something like this. The Archbishop of Canterbury says to the king, "Will you, to the utmost of your power, maintain in the United Kingdom the Protestant Reformed religion established by law, and will you maintain and preserve inviolably the settlement of the Church of England?" These are quite important words. This is basically a rallying cry to kick Catholics out of the establishment and to keep them out. Now, as you know, Catholics were kicked out. That was the whole point of the Reformation and the new Protestant dynasty that was started. In fact, Catholics were only allowed back into England in the 19th century. There came a point when they were allowed to come back to the universities, allowed back into the professions, but with some reluctance. And you might say today that the hierarchy of the Catholic Church are still a bit reluctant to stand up and take their place, because something of the shadow of this permission to come back into society still hangs over the Catholic Church. And Charles makes his oath and says, "I, Charles, do solemnly and sincerely in the presence of God profess, testify and declare that I am a faithful Protestant, and that I will, according to the true intent of the enactments which secure the Protestant succession to the throne, uphold and maintain the said enactments to the best of my powers, according to law." In other words, you can trust me to keep the Pope at bay, to keep Catholics at bay, to keep Catholic bishops at bay, to keep the Mass at bay, to keep Our Lady at bay. This is a Protestant setup. Now, this is the oath that he's promised as defender of the faith to swear. It's pretty non-inclusive, and in fact it's very exclusive. So here we have, if you like, a form of cognitive dissonance where Charles has done everything he can to undermine the profound mystery of the coronation, to make it relativistic and inclusive. And yet at the heart of it, he's forced to make this profoundly exclusive oath. So basically, the message comes: we welcome Buddhists and Muslims and Jains and Zoroastrians and Hindus, and God bless our cousins the Jews and Muslims, but not Catholics. This is an extraordinary confusion of category, and it doesn't really bode well for a joined up and integrated view of monarchy or kingship. Now you might say, well, he doesn't mean it. Well, that's a problem. Making a severe and solemn oath before God that he doesn't mean. You might say he should have rewritten it, but you see, it couldn't be rewritten. The parliamentary time that it would take to do that, let alone all the canards it would open up in terms of, do we want to be a republic? What kind of oath should he make? Should they be Christian anyway? Would be impossible to resolve. So what we have here is a series of really very difficult contradictions. The contradiction between the relativism of interfaith and multiculturalism and the absolute claims of Christianity, as well as Islam and Judaism, of course. The relativism of a democratic monarchy where everyone has a say, with the fact that monarchy actually is a Christian concept that is absolutist and has been tamed by Parliament. But essentially it's been deactivated to become, well, just a piece of icing on the cake. And yet the king could use influence if he has no power. Perhaps that's what a monarchy is for. Maybe it's to use influence. Wouldn't it be good if the king was a Christian and used his Christian influence? Because after all, he's defender of the faith. Now, just as a matter of record, so you know, this is not the same title as defender of the faith that King Henry VIII was given by the Pope. The Pope took that back when Henry was excommunicated. But about 100 years later, the English Parliament was jealous and cross that the Pope had removed this title from the monarchy. So they made it themselves. They gave the king the title defender of, but in this time, the Protestant faith. So Charles is and has the title of Fid Def, defender of the faith, but it's the Protestant faith. Is he going to defend the faith? Well, the first sign is that he's not, because actually what he's trying to do is defend all faiths. He said this about 30 years ago, and we took him seriously at the time, but we rather hoped he might grow out of it, if only because you can't be defender of all faiths because they're mutually exclusive. At least the absolutist ones are. So how can you be defender of mutually exclusive faiths? Unless you're a Jungian, of course, which is what he is. But Lambeth Palace tried to glue together the conceptual contradictions that the Archbishop is going to, has set running, and says that here is a modern understanding of the legal text, mainly that it seeks to foster an environment where all people of faiths and beliefs may live freely. Well, that's rather nice, isn't it? Except that that's exactly the task. All people of faiths are not able to live and believe freely. And the people mainly who are not able to live and believe freely are the Christians. Who needs a defender of the faith? Well, the Batley teacher who disappeared into hiding after he'd shown cartoons, as had been done in every year previously as part of the curriculum. He'd shown cartoons of Mohammed that had been shown, that had kicked off the Charlie Hebdo assassinations. And the local Islamic community drove him out of town. He's still in hiding. He needs protection. Is the protector of the faith going to use any of his influence to protect the faith? Then there are the pro-life people. They're mainly Catholic, but not all. A good number of evangelical people there too. So what about the women who are getting arrested on the sidewalks or pavements of, as it was, Birmingham, for praying within a few hundred yards of an abortion clinic after it was closed, when the police come up to them and say, "What are you doing?" And they say, "I'm praying." And the policeman pulls out his handcuffs and says, "You're arrested," and takes them off. Will they get protected by the king, who has entered into these feudal arrangements with society that should cascade right the way down? And as the Archbishop of Canterbury's friends and spokespeople have said, intending to produce an atmosphere where all people of faith can live and practice freely. Will these women who are being arrested by the police for their prayers for the preborn get any of the influence of the king? What about the Christians who believe that marriage is because their faith tells them to, and because it's been a biological fact for thousands of years up until last week or the week before last week? What about the Christians who believe that marriage is between a man and a woman and flourishes best, and that children are brought up between men and women who they belong to biologically best? Will they get any of the influence of the king? The answer appears to be at the moment that they won't. There is no evidence that Charles, in his relativism and wokeness, is interested in defending the rights and the freedoms of conscience of those who take their faith seriously. I think the problem for the king and his advisors is they've made the wrong decision. They've backed the wrong horse. Because, you see, what they've done is they've tried to placate the powers that be, secular society. Have you noticed that the progressives have no aim that they can get to where they say, we have achieved some form of reformed stability? The progressive mindset is to go on tearing down the establishment in the vain pursuit of ever elusive utopias that don't exist. There's no point at which the progressive turns into a conservative. It's a kind of an addiction to try and make things constantly better. So I don't think that by placating the progressives, the king has in mind a plateau of stability where everyone can agree, now we've reached the place of inclusivity, now we've reached the place of maximum freedom, of multiculturalism. There is no stopping this machine as it goes downhill without brakes. In other words, what Charles has done is he's tied himself to a project that has no end apart from dystopianism. When will it stop? It won't. And the danger is it will carry the king and the monarchy along with him. Because the people to whom Charles has made himself a hostage are not interested in the monarchy. They're not interested in what the monarchy stands for. Indeed, most of them on the centre and the left, and most of them under 60, don't even believe in it. The only people who are interested in the monarchy as a concept are Christians, and to some extent conservatives, who believe that the stability the monarchy gives is safer than allowing a president to take over and pollute the public square with his political preferences. So the very people that Charles needs to defend him are the people that he's alienating and isolating by pursuing the progressive, secularist, multicultural, relativist culture. There will be a crisis. It was a dreadful crisis when poor Diana died. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody realised that it would nearly dethrone the Queen. Clever, wise, Christian, mature, and well advised as she was, it nearly dethroned her. Such was the wave of sentiment, the populist, angry sentiment that arose from Diana's death. What do you think will happen to her son? Already he's lost quite a lot of the credentials he might have had when some of the videos of him losing his temper over a fountain pen that didn't work to sign an important document were released. It doesn't look good when the privileged would-be king loses his temper with a flunky or a servant over a pen that doesn't work. It looked very bad, and it suggested that the future may not be a happy one. But when the crisis comes, when we can't see, who is Charles going to be able to rely on for his monarchy and for support? It's going to make it increasingly difficult for Christians to do it, because they know he doesn't believe in them. And since there's a feudal relationship at the heart of all this, why should they believe in him? It's going to make it quite difficult for Catholics to believe in and to support a Protestant king who's happy to make oaths excluding them from the body politic. Oaths that have stretched back over several hundred years and remind us of a really terrible 16th century police state where our forebears were hung, drawn and quartered because they wanted to bring the mass to faithful Christians, Catholics who'd gone underground. Well, those years are not with us now, although there's some sense they may return. Increasingly, we're hearing that Catholics may have to go underground with their beliefs in order to avoid hate crimes and thought police. Not just Catholics, all faithful Christians, but also Catholics. One of the things that I'm reminded of is a time when I carried theological books. I smuggled them into Prague and Czechoslovakia. The reason I'm talking about this more nowadays is because I went to visit the underground Catholic Church. The state in those days refused to allow the bishops to ordain Catholic men to the priesthood, taking the view quite pragmatically that if they could only do that, there would be no church within a generation. No priests, no mass, no church. And so people like me smuggled the theology books in so they could study in secret and private, away from the state, and they could be ordained as part of the underground Catholic Church. Increasingly, as woke ideology gets a firmer grip on the imaginations of the people we live amongst, and as there are fewer and fewer people in the public square to stand up and speak out for the Christian conscience, for the freedom of everyone's conscience, so the prospect of our having to go underground, or at least pursue the Benedict option, as a very wise Rod Dreher put it to us, grows. The problem is that if there is no relationship of trust and fidelity between a most Christian monarch and his most Christian people, who is he going to look to for support when the crisis comes? Will the monarchy survive? I don't know. But to the extent to which the nation is not Christian, to that extent, the chances of its survival are severely reduced. Will people believe in the monarchy? You know, those creative writers at Lambeth Palace who dropped the coronation service came up with this lovely idea. What world do they live in? That what they might do is give every person sitting on the couch or in the street watching a programme the opportunity to make their own oath of allegiance to the king. But what for? Why give your allegiance to a king who hasn't given his allegiance to you so much as to a multicultural, relativistic, utopian project he's trying to placate? But at the end of the popular oath that people are invited to give, it says, God bless King Charles, may he live forever. Nobody actually wishes that. It comes from some very bizarre, ancient historical resource where you flatter the monarch in a way that is wholly unrealistic. We appear to have been entering the world of make-believe, and it's almost impossible to take seriously. If you can't take the oath of allegiance that the public are invited to swear seriously, you probably can't take the allegiance it's intended to represent seriously either. Well, the coronation service will happen in a few days' time after this is being put up on YouTube. We wish King Charles well. We pray for him and for his family. We pray for social stability. But what we long for most of all is the opportunity to evangelize our country and to make it more and not less Christian, more and not less sane, to guard freedom of speech and freedom of conscience rather to allow them to be eroded, to guard a Christian anthropology rather than the madness that is ending up in the emasculation and the castration of our teenagers who've suffered from a form of gender dysphoria on a scale that is unbelievably large. We know what to pray for, we know what to long for, we know what to work for. It would be good if the King, His Most Christian Majesty, also believed in those things. It's in his interests to do so. Perhaps we can pray for the conversion of King Charles III and for the stability of his as yet not very Christian monarchy. Literally, God save the King.